really just listening to the insured, not over talking them, giving understanding, allowing them to display to you their issue. And so if you can actually hear what they're saying, then you can help.
We are back. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for the season 2 of the New Adjuster podcast. My name is Murphy Buggs. I'm with the property training department here at CNC, and my co-host is
David James. I'm also with the property training department.
And we're very thankful to have you this year. We touched on a lot of great subjects in season 1, from the realm of property and flood and desk and field adjusting. This season, we want to dive a little bit deeper into those subjects, as well as introduce some new ones as far as the licensing from the recruiting side of things whenever you're getting started as a new adjuster, even in the auto side of adjusting. So the value of this podcast grows with each and every episode as we just give you more and more knowledge and maybe more ideas and issues that we see as a new adjuster that will help you really get into the field of adjusting. So the audio of this podcast will be on Apple and Spotify, and the video will be on YouTube as well. So however you may be watching, however you may be listening, we send our thankfulness and gratitude to you that you are joining us for season 2, and we hope that you have a great time and learn some new things about the field of adjusting. All right, without further ado, we want to jump into the first episode of Season 2 of the New Adjuster podcast. Joining us today is a very special guest, a desk adjuster that recently worked with CNC, Mr. Kenneth Walker. Kenneth, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we're super glad to have you. Absolutely super glad to have you. Talk a little bit about as you being a new adjuster in this field, and for new adjusters that are listening and or watching, how many years of experience did you have before you got into this deployment? How long have you been doing it since you've been on the deployment? Are you still currently working? And then if you've worked before, how many hurricanes or storms or deployments have you worked up until this point?
Okay, well, this is my first deployment.
Oh, okay.
And I'm currently working with some of the end claims as well. We just kind of transitioned into daily claims, and it was definitely an adjustment. I really enjoy it, mainly because you have to have some empathy, and you have to understand that the customers, it's customer service basically.
Right.
Being able to give insured, the communication that they need so they can feel secure. As far as adjusting, I think that it's a fast pace. You got to be able to keep up. You got to have great office etiquette, and you got to be professional at all times. Coming from working in the office setting, it wasn't a bad adjustment for me. Just understanding that we have tasks to fulfill to make sure that the insured is safe, feeling safe, making sure that their home is being taken care of by the carrier.
Yeah, absolutely.
First deployment. So have you been deployed the entire time, or were you released, let go, and come back, or did you get another deployment? Has you just been
Thankfully,
the whole time, right?
Thankfully, I've been deployed the whole time, the entire time.
Yeah, so I want to get into that a little bit. So you've been deployed the whole time. Usually, for newer folks, you come in and you work a storm, and it works itself out as far as the volume as it goes down. If there's no more work, you have to try to find some more work, but you stayed on the entire time. So how do you think that what's made you stay here or stay deployed, what you've seen and what you may have experienced?
I think adjusting well, carrying out tasks as given, just staying on task. I think that's the biggest role, being able to keep up. If you're not able to understand what's going on, I think that can be your biggest downfall, because reading is fundamental when it comes to adjusting. You have to go into the SOP and actually understand what that carrier is providing, to understand what they want to give to the insurer.
Right. So, I'll tell you something. When I first started, I'm not going to say how long ago it was, but a long time ago, I just got started, and you kind of know how things start to slow down, and I'm like, I need to keep working. What do I want to do to keep working? So I went and asked, and I'll never forget it. It was 4 to 5 things that they told me to keep you deployed is, like you mentioned, taking care of your policyholders, like surveys, making sure they're satisfied, being coachable, okay, especially if you're new, taking not so much criticism, but taking what you may make mistakes at, or what you need to do here or there, or something you can improve on, and being open to it instead of just being shut off and you know more than the person that's been doing it for 20 years or whatever. The other one is licensing, obviously.
Yes.
The more licenses you have, the more deployable you are. And being on time, showing up. If you want to do it, you got to be passionate about it and show the work ethic there. So that was just wanted to get your take on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So another thing is too, and you talked about when you first come in, you're reading the SOPs, standard operating procedures and policies and things like that.
Yeah.
What are some other initial responsibilities, like first couple days of the storm, whenever you come on a deployment, what's really the first things you're doing when you get at a desk and after you've gone through the initial onboarding training? What do you do after that? What's your first thing you start doing?
Well, first initial contact, just making sure you're making contact with these insured to let them know that they're not out there by themselves.
Right.
After the initial contact, letting them know that the scheduling department may be making contact to go ahead to schedule an inspection, which is very important. Just giving them the different tasks that they need to follow to make sure that when the field adjuster come out, a tarp's not on the roof, or they have access to the home to avoid this inspection being canceled because of the high volume of claims that, especially during the hurricane end, because it was a high volume of claims. Everyone needed help. Everybody wanted assistance, but we had to make sure that they did their part as well. So, and that was very big.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You touched on it, and for me, I still, when we teach classes and talk to newer folks, as far as what to do or be successful, is setting the expectation. Yeah. What to expect. And I always tell folks is to put yourself in their shoes. What would you want to know? And you said that, like their life's turned upside down. No matter how big or small the claim is, you're out of your routine, right?
Yes.
So, you used to getting up, going to work every day. Well, now you have a hole in your roof, or you can't use your kitchen, or half the floor is tore up, or whatever it is. So you have to, like you touched on it too, having empathy and being sympathetic with them and try to understand where they're coming from, and trying to see it from their perspective and help them in the best way. Reassure them that it's our goal to put you back in the condition you were prior to the loss.
Yes.
Yeah, and I heard you mention it too. One of the biggest things is the insured's not having power. What are some other conditions that you saw? I know you mentioned tarps on the roof, no power. What are some other conditions right after the loss that policyholders are dealing with that you have to help them, kind of coach them through that process on what to do and how do they get the process started? Because some of it's on the policyholder to get the ball rolling on the claim.
Well, helping the insured to understand that they can mitigate their own home, helping the insured to identify that their living situation, saying that they're not livable, may not be the carrier's
definition
yeah, I
get
of
what you're saying.
Yeah. So different things like that, being able to identify that just because you smell mold, that it may not be mold. Right. Mold is already in the home anyway,
right,
just on a natural.
Right.
So just giving them the understanding and giving them I won't say the lame terms of what we expect, because we can give them all the policies and they're still not able to understand.
Sure.
So determining their coverage and asking them, do they understand, giving them time to thoroughly review the coverage determination that we may have sent out to them via email or by mail. It's just really customer service and communication across the board, which what really would carry a desk adjuster anyway, is communicating with them, making them feel, because everybody's going to have their times where they're impatient about what's going on, but it's a lot of stuff is out of our control as well, because the field adjuster may not be able to have access to get to the insured at that time or that day, and they may just be booked for the day in that area. So it's just a lot of different intangibles that we have to go through to let the insured know that we have their back and we're going to get them back to their pre-loss condition.
Right. You touched on it as far as communication being key, what we've discussed, and I'll ask you this. Have you ever, prior to coming here in your deployment, how many times have you read your policy?
Never read my policy.
Okay. So, me neither.
Never read my policy.
Until I started doing this. So that was one of the things is, whenever they would ask me a question and I didn't know, my response would be, let me check your policy. right?
Yes.
Because it was in a different language to me from the outside, and I mean I'm relying on you to help me. You know, you're the expert from that. So communication is very vital. Also, working with the field adjuster or the other folks. There may be a housing vendor involved. You have to coordinate that with the customer and let them know. We may have assistants to help you. Be on the lookout for their phone call, and you document the first contact. To me, is key because that's where you set the expectations
and exceed expectations too.
Yes, and you again go back to what would you want to know? What do you need to know? Ask the questions. Have I covered everything with you? What are you expecting? And throw that out there. Try to go ahead. I always try to jump the hurdle of we want to find coverage for you.
Yes.
Okay. We're not out to deny any of your damages that you're claiming. Our job is to find coverage for you.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're handling hurricane claims, obviously the stress level is high, right? You know, you got a bunch of new claims that are put on your desk or in your queue from day one. How do you manage your day? Because obviously, you may have 100 claims assigned to you. How do you prioritize one from the next, or do you do the highest severity claims first to lowest? How does that work for you? How do you order that out?
Well, and it's set up in different systems. So we use activities. I think that was my biggest, help. It was my go-to. Assigning yourself activities. Once you make initial contact, to follow up with the field adjuster to see if they uploaded, their documents, so we can go ahead and review. Just being able to stay on task. As far as severity, I mean, I wouldn't say that we would schedule it due to severity.
Okay.
If that claim came in, we want to take it as it come.
Every claim's different, right?
Yeah, every claim is different.
Every claim's different. And every claim's important.
Yeah.
The policyholders, we shouldn't, tell them that we have 75 claims. And the only one they care about is theirs, right?
Right.
That's definitely
the most important one you have. That's right.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
That's exactly right.
So, staying organized. I know you talk about tasks and activities, but I mean that's one of the keys to success, in my opinion, is being organized and coming in. And I can tell you that in the morning you write all your estimates, or you write all your notes, and in the afternoon you make all your phone calls. But that may not work for Murphy.
Yeah.
It may not work for you or whatever. But that's what works for me. But as long as you're handling and staying in compliance. And one of the biggest complaints or the biggest opportunities is staying in constant communication with the policyholder, and keeping them up to date on what's going on, rather than just being left out there for a week, 2 weeks, not knowing, what I haven't heard from my adjuster in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's just.
Yeah. So, obviously you're going to have, in a catastrophe scenario, you're going to have policyholders. Some of them are super upset. Like you said, some of them may be impatient. But with every one of those, I think, comes a good story, a heartwarming story, a memorable story. Tell us about, maybe some particular claims where, it was, it's a disaster scenario, right? Mm-hmm. It is a breakup from normal life. What are some areas where you did exceed expectations in? And, what are some good feedback that you got on things that you did well that may help a new adjuster, give them some tips on how can I exceed expectations from that first phone call all the way to the end?
Well, really just listening to the insured, not over talking them, giving understanding, allowing them to display to you their issue. And so if you can actually hear what they're saying, then you can help. I had an insured who was initially, they needed a tarp.
Right.
But they were scrambling around, not knowing. They was probably in the mid 80s, and like, I'm not getting on top of the roof. I was like, it's okay. We can send our service provider over to go ahead and get you tarp. She's like, oh, thank you so much, because I didn't know what I was going to do without that.
Right.
And just going throughout the process, the personal property, and, utilizing the tools that we have to getting those services over. We have different providers that can come in and do the inventory for you, to talk to you, because a lot of the insurers were not using email address. So that was a tough task too, because when you have access to email, we can go ahead and get those documentation and everything over to you really quickly. But if we got to send it through the mail, it's a lot harder.
A little bit longer, yeah.
But the insured was very happy about the communication more than anything. Even though it took some time, they were happy about that because they was like, you stayed with me throughout the whole process and you communicated with me. You did not leave me on red, pretty much.
Right.
I think that's the biggest factor, being able to communicate and understand what you're talking about. Like, because if you're telling the insured that you don't know, then they're like going left. They're going crazy. Like, hey, can I speak to a supervisor?
Sure.
Escalating the call, escalating the claim. And I think that's the biggest deal, being able to give comfort through communication.
Yeah.
I like that phrase.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because the thing about it is communication is key, and it's a word you mentioned 4 or 5 times just then. And a lot of times, from my personal experience, it may not be, phone call may not be the best avenue. Sometimes, like you said, they're not using email. I know a lot of times desk adjusters will text policyholders. That's an easy, quick way for them to shoot you back a text. They may be at work and they can't answer the phone, but that text is, not only reassuring to let them know, hey, I'm here for you, but you're also gaining information at the same time. So, yeah, I would say communication is key for a desk adjuster, just as you just spoke to.
Yes.
Looking back on, I'm a firm believer in learning from each storm or each deployment. Obviously, this has been you're still on your first deployment. Knowing now versus when you first come in, is there anything that sticks out that did it meet your expectations, or were you expecting something less or more, or anything?
Well,
share?
It was definitely different. Getting in and understanding what tools you need, different tools like being certified for Xactimate, actually understanding those line items when you have to break down a scope dispute.
Sure, right.
I think is very important because if you don't know what a soffit is, then you're like, what's going on?
You're speaking another language to you, right?
Yeah, you get a lot of direction to pay and assignment of benefits, and they're speaking in their language as a contractor. It
can be intimidating.
Yeah, because I'm trying to resolve the claim, but I don't know what you're talking about. And being able to have all those different tools is definitely an advantage that you can have. Being able to be sitting at a desk and being able to do the research and be able to identify what these different it's a lingo. Everybody has a different lingo to just like desk adjusters. We may be talking about a SOP and everybody like, what's a SOP?
Right.
Right. But
spell that out for me.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it definitely being able to understand those different line items. As far as customer service, I think I just kind of put myself into that insured's shoes, because I want to be taken care of. I want that person on the other end of the phone to be able to take care of me and make me feel comfortable, especially if I'm paying an insurance premium. So I think that's the biggest take, just being equipped to handle any claim that come in front of you, because each carrier is going to definitely have a different way that they want you to handle their claims.
Right.
But I think the basics, understanding line items, understanding policy,
customer service, being empathetic, and it goes back to, if you're serious about it, is just taking. There's free training out there,
Yes.
From in really any avenue you want to search for. Just like for CNC, we've got our own LMS system that you can go in and
CNC
take the
Pro.
modules.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what would you give to, like I said, a new adjuster? That's our audience here. So a new adjuster that wants to get into the desk adjusting aspect of catastrophe deployments. What's some advice that you would give, other than the customer service aspect and train as much as you can? What's some tips and some tricks that you can help with a brand new person? They get that call, they're licensed, they're ready to be deployed. What are some things that you can tell them that day one, hey, just be prepared for this, expect this? What are some things that you can speak to on those notions?
For new adjusters coming in, the thing that I will give you is that you have to be versatile.
Yeah.
You got to be able to pivot at any time. The first day you may be doing initial appointments. The next day you may be writing coverage determination letters. And then you may be calling the field adjuster to communicate with them. So just being able to handle multiple tasks, you got to be able to multitask. You got to be able to pivot, and you can't get into this for one particular thing. You got to be ready to help someone. That's the biggest goal. Like being able to go to sleep at night saying, "Hey, I help this insured get back into their home."
Right.
That's the biggest deal. I think a lot of time people get into this field and they look at maybe the financial part of it, but
Sure.
you get lost in the shuffle if it's just about that.
Right.
Because you definitely gotta have a heart for it.
Yeah, you got to care about it. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Especially working 7 days a week, 12-hour days,
Oh
right?
yeah, because
are you in town, out of town? Or did you travel into the firm location? Do you work remote? Do they require you to be on site? And there's lots of things to take into consideration as far as, do you have to get your own equipment? Is it applied to you, provided to you? Different investments that you have to make, going in there and just researching it. Are you serious about it, or are you just going to work the storm and go back to doing what you were doing?
Yeah, and you mentioned too as well the fact of being able to pivot and move around to different avenues of the claim. You may have 5 of them that are on day one, and another 10 of them that are at the XYZ portion of the claim. I mean, it's the kind of the famous adage, adjusting, we adjust. That's part of it. You got to be able to adjust and navigate your way through your daily life as a desk adjuster, or as a field adjuster, being able to pivot from an initial contact to now I've got to call and explain to somebody why it's denied or why it's paid for. You got to be able to, open yourself up and have a heart and care about it and be able to explain to each and every person why they're the most important and be able to fully invest your time and your mind into that specific policyholder. So
tell me this, answer me this, or validate it or not. One of the bigger obstacles, or one of the biggest misconceptions out there, is denying somebody a part or their entire claim. I know for myself, some folks appreciate it if you just take the time to explain why, right?
Yes.
Have you had an instance like that to where they're just like, what, I didn't know that, but thank you for.
Oh yeah, denying a policyholder their claim, it can be a difficult task, but again, we revert back to communication.
Mm-hmm.
You can't send an insured denial via email and don't call them, because then
you are going to get a phone call.
Yeah, so then we have an escalated claim. But being able to call them and give them understanding, and sometimes it's good to even take a piece of that policy out of it and point them in the direction.
Right.
Like, we may not cover personal property because it may be an antique or something like that.
Right.
And we don't know the value of it.
Sure.
It may not necessarily be a storm created opening. So we want to know what the issue is. So you have a hurricane policy, but you had an AC leak. And so we're not going to cover that. And so when you explain that to an insured, they may not be as happy because they want to get that thing taken care of.
Right.
But when you break it down to them, they know that we've done everything that we're supposed to do on our ends,
right,
to try to cover that claim. So I think it's difficult just when you're dealing with them and they don't have no place to go.
Right.
Yeah, so
Absolutely. Well, we touched on a lot of good topics. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you being here. I know David appreciates you being here as well. Like I said, the answers you gave were super important. They're super informative for new adjusters that are trying to get into this field. So again, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. You were fantastic. We'd love to have you back again sometime in the future.
Thanks for being here.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Kenneth.
All right.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the New Adjuster Podcast, Season 2, Episode 1. As you can tell here, we've changed up the setup here in the desk a little bit. We do have a new guest, Brady Huggins, field adjuster that's worked for us in the past a little bit, and want to bring him in live from Lincoln, Nebraska, to ask him a couple questions. So, Brady, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, all right, good deal. All right, so let's jump right into it. Let's talk about, for the folks that may not be aware of who you are and what you've done, how you got to this point. How many years have you worked as a field adjuster, and how many hurricanes, like named, big catastrophe storms, have you worked? Not just for CNC, but just in general.
Yeah, my first hurricane was Hurricane Ike back in 2008, was actually with CNC. Before that, my dad was an independent adjuster, so I kind of was a claims assistant with him, working hand in hand, getting the training and everything. Since then, I think I was trying to count the other day. I think I have 13 hurricanes under my belt.
Wow.
And then, Texas freeze, hailstorms, which you don't name hailstorms, you just remember the good ones.
Right.
And yeah, so that's kind of my bread and butter is, every major hurricane I've worked. Didn't go out to Sandy. I was doing other things, but there really wasn't much else between '08 and then 16. It seems to hit one every year. See if we keep it going.
That's right.
Yeah. The Texas freeze, folks seem to forget about that. You don't necessarily have to have a hurricane to have a catastrophe. And I know that was widespread across Texas with that. Folks are still putting their homes back together.
Yeah, it absolutely was.
Oh. So let's talk about, talk to us a little bit about with, let's say, Hurricane Ian, your initial responsibilities, task, things that when you first got set up or when you got into the area, obviously making contact with your policyholders, but what was your experience? What did you do to get set up and kind of get into a groove?
Yeah, my prep for hurricanes start probably a week before they hit. I'm watching the models. I'm watching the different personalities online, and I got the guys that I follow. And kind of I give my wife a scale. It's always a 0 to 10. I put her at we're at a 3. That means keeping an eye on it pretty good. Once we get above 5, it's time to start doing some laundry. Not making any purchases, not spending any money yet. But once we get above 7, 8, 9, then I got to make sure my gear's ready. I got to make sure I have enough notepads. I have batteries, my measures. If I'm working hail all year, I got to make sure my moisture meter is working, that my laser measure is working. Make sure I have all that stuff, and then prepping for potentially, going into an area that doesn't have, food available, things like that. So I go to Sam's Club, load up on all that stuff, getting the car ready. So that's all happening the week prior. And then it's a full 2-day drive for me to get down to the coast, pretty much any coast. So once it hits, I'm heading down there. We're securing lodging. I'll go through and I'll, watching the models, and Ian wasn't the most well forecast storm. We were looking in Orlando area to drive into Tampa. So we booked an Airbnb there with cancellation. We were able to cancel that. Then we locked down lodging in Sarasota because we weren't quite sure where we were going to be working yet, but we knew that was striking distance. Right. But other areas, when I'm not in Florida, I'll go through and book hotel rooms, multiple hotel rooms in multiple areas for a week to get me started to see. And then, all that I can cancel. And Florida is so easy with the lodging. There's so many rentals. It's nice working down there for that.
Especially in Orlando with Disney World being right there, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. It's interesting you say that as far as booking hotels, because from a new adjuster standpoint, they may not know this, but wherever you're staying at, really, you could be in the same hotel as the policyholder that you're working on their claim with.
Exactly. We're in competition. We call it, if you're staying in a hotel, and usually, as y'all know, I travel with a little group of adjusters. So we usually get a house, which is just much more comfortable. Sure. But I've run plenty of solo deployments, like the Iowa derecho, which was basically a hurricane in Iowa. And you're outside, if you walk outside, you're there with the homeowners. It's a lot of competition for those hotel rooms. So if you can if you know where you're going, if you're a new adjuster and you know where the war room is going to be set up, and that's where you're going to stay, and you'll just figure you'll drive no matter what. Yeah. you book it for at least 2-3 weeks, because the real peak and when the hotel rooms are going to be gone is after about 5 days after the storm. That's whenever people are coming back from evacuating. That's when they're going to be locking those hotel rooms up.
Right. The one thing I want to ask about that, a lot of new adjusters aren't aware of that. They think, hurricane travels, I just got to go there and I got to work claims, but they don't think about the lodging portion. Do you sign up for, like rewards programs like hotels.com and things like that? Does that kind of help you get in the door and get started with those stays? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So hotels.com is where I book everything through hotels.com on a credit card that gives me rewards. So I get double rewards on that. And they've just recently changed everything. And this is like an ad for hotels.com, but they're with also Expedia and VRBO. So you get rewards through all of them into one account. But it used to be something like every 10th night is a free stay, I use for family vacations.
I was just about to say.
That's what I book those for, and that's what I use my points for. We can knock out a couple $100 off of a little 3 or 4 day trip. It's pretty nice.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's actually a good question.
Absolutely makes sense. So obviously you get down there, right? You're staying in your hotel. You talked about having, MiFi spots and things like that. Like if there's no internet signal thing. Other than that, what kind of conditions do you run into? I mean, other than it probably being incredibly hot, what other kind of conditions do you run into? What are some things that you have to think about ahead of time before you get there?
Yep. And this is, I think it's more of a little bit of an old school prior one. The Florida's response this time was so amazing at how fast they had everything up. But in prior storms, like my dad is old school, so I always would hear him. You got to have cash because a lot of the places' credit cards are going to be down, and that still does happen. You need cash on hand. I drive a car, so I get really good gas mileage, so I don't ever bring a gas tank with me because I don't want a gas tank in my car. But if you drive a big old truck, get a gas tank in the back so you can double fill up. Because a lot of times you're going to have to wait in long lines for gas.
What about, have you ever had a flat tire?
That's what I was going to say. Make sure you have a spare tire. Make sure you know how to do it.
Fix a flat.
Make sure you know where it is. Yep, fix a flat, all that good stuff. Jared last year pulled up to the house and his battery was dying, so he had to go and find a place to get his battery replaced. So, and last year I had my car go down for about 4 or 5 days towards the end of Ian, and I had to take it to a shop and get all this expensive Florida work done on it. So you got to know your resources. You can always rent a car.
Yeah.
You got to make sure your equipment's as good as it gets. But if you're brand new and you're starting out, you're not going to be able to. You might be on a car that's a little shaky. You might need to be prepared for, if your AC goes out. There's a lot of hidden expenses that can pop up.
Right. Kind of like, if you go into really ground zero, you've got debris all over the place you're driving over. You got mosquitoes and bugs and everything.
I don't know how. I didn't catch a nail at Michael, but you should be. I haven't caught it. Oh, that next storm I will for sure now. But I've never caught a nail in the tire on these storms. But some of the stuff you drive through is, you're driving through some questionable stuff. You're like, is there, I don't know, about 2 inches of water on that road?
Right.
You make some decisions there. So you just got to be smart about it.
Yeah. What kind of challenges, maybe with Hurricane Ian, but in the past, anything stand out to you and being able to see damage, determine coverage, if it's something blocking your view or going in there, or even paperwork, like, the system's not up. We talked about the Wi-Fi being up or down, the power. How do you keep like a notebook? Everything's electronic, and now we got AI going on these days. How did you overcome any of that?
Yeah, I'm old school. I use scope notes. I have a notepad and pen, paper, and my photos are on a memory card for my camera. I separate all my devices so that I have that. Internet, we will purposely stay away from the ground zero right away. We move closer as the storm progresses. Yeah. So we started in Sarasota where power was on. Power stayed on up there, amazingly. Power was on. We had internet. We make sure we have internet. So, because without that, we're not working. Right. You can still write up claims. You can still label photos. You can do everything, but you can't submit the claim. You can't be paid unless you submit the claim. So we are ready to go day one on that. Even if I have to drive an extra 45 minutes, that's worth it to me. And then we move closer at the end of it. We were staying in Cape Coral. So you progress. You got to be ready to move as you need to be more efficient. As for scoping the properties, depends what country, where you're at. If you're in Louisiana, if you're in the Panhandle, if you're in North Carolina, you're going to have trees everywhere, and you just got to do the best you can do. I know at Michael, I was climbing over fallen trees. I was trying to get as close as I could to see it. You can assume some damage with some of these. Like Louisiana, big old oak tree splits a house in half, and you see a big old foundation crack.
Right.
The house is done.
One of the challenges with that is you've got to come back and once the tree is removed, you've got to go back and inspect because it's impossible to know all the damage.
Yeah, and that's common outside of hurricanes. That's tree claims. that's all across the country, windstorms. And that's more common, I would say, in a windstorm deployment than a hurricane deployment. Because hurricane deployments, you get the trees moving pretty quick because the area floods with contractors.
Right.
Yeah. And you have those little, the canopy of a tree is up against the house. You don't know if it even damaged it. So you can, you make sure it's aware of it, but you can at least get the initial part, documented. And if it's severe, you can make sure the desk adjuster knows that this person needs ALE, this person, they have severe water damage inside. You can at least get that. And it calms the insured down too, to know I've already seen someone, they're on it. You get to meet them face to face. You're no longer just over the phone. You can calm them down, let them know, I'll be back as soon as I can. Just call me once that tree's moved.
Right. You don't want to go out and in a hurricane, you get 60, 70 claims. You don't want to go out and inspect all of them in the first week and then come back home to the opposite side of the country and try to write them. I think that's a myth there as far as being able to do that accurately. That's just not the best idea.
Yeah, I think you forget all the tiny details, the nuances, on each claim if you try to do that. If you try to inspect, and then write at the end, I can see that being a huge challenge.
Or how about floodwater? Yeah. This one had a lot of flooding. I wasn't working Central Florida, but I know some guys that were out there and they couldn't get out there.
Sure.
You got to let it go down. Florence was bad about that. Roads weren't open.
Right.
Yeah.
Harvey, that same thing. You can't, a lot of these that dump the big amounts of water, then the insureds usually know. They're like, yeah, it's still underwater. I mean, in Fort Myers, my first day, I waded through it wasn't nasty, wasn't stuff I couldn't wade through, but I waded through, but got to the house, but maybe get you some tall boots because
just gonna say,
do what you gotta do.
Get your waders.
Yeah.
Yep.
You duck hunt. Yeah. So, another part of it is too, for new adjusters, it's a large undertaking right up front, right? You got a lot of equipment, you got a lot of upfront expenses, and to go along with that, you got a lot of stress, right? Your stress level is 10 out of 10. How do you deal with that on your first storm? How do you deal with that stress level? How does it kind of go down over time? And then as you do more storms, talk to us about that. How does that, make it easier for the next storm and the one after that?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but the initial dump of claims, you're trying to travel there, that stress is never going to go away.
Sure.
If it does, it means you don't care anymore.
Right.
You got timelines to hit. You need to make contact with those people. You got to also somehow drive. That's part of it, but it's through experience. You just get more and more used to it. I felt like Ian, I was running as probably the best I've ever run. It just felt everything was seamless for me. But I had that benefit of, this is a carrier I've worked a lot of claims for. I don't have a lot of questions up front, but I've even, with my experience, whenever I go run a hurricane for a new carrier, it is a bumpy start. I'm getting revisions for things that I didn't know. Why am I having to revise that? That's not how I write my estimates. They don't want me using this one word in my photos, that kind of thing. And it's frustrating. It slows you down, but you pick it up over time.
Yeah. Some advice. I mean, obviously you're seasoned. You've been doing it for a very long time and very good at it. What, if I was new, looking to get into it, change a career, or just got my license and a hurricane hit or a catastrophe hit, what kind of advice would you give yourself if you were starting over or if you were brand new?
Yeah, and I like to say I've made every mistake you can make, kind of thing. So
you learn.
You're gonna make mistakes. I still make mistakes to this day. Don't overextend yourself. That's probably the hardest thing to do, even for me today. Someone calls me and says, "Hey, I got this claim over here. Can you take it?" Why would I say no? I can make money off of that. Well, I take it, and then it takes me 3 weeks to get to it because I've overextended myself out west, and this one's out east. So be reasonable. Understand that just like if you're opening any business, you're not going to make as much money as you would like to. You got to put in the time to earn that. And it's just, I would say if you have a firm and you are starting brand new and they're trying to drop, 75 claims on you as brand new, and you're like, speak up, say, hey, this is too much for me, kind of thing, so don't overextend yourself, take it slow. Do not overscope. That's the one lesson I've learned that I've actually applied now. I do not overscope anymore.
Yeah.
Now my not overscoping is probably more than a new adjuster. So I can go look at 6, 7, 8 a day, and I'm still not going to miss my turnaround times.
Right.
Once you know your territory and the damage you're dealing with too.
Right.
If it means going out for one, if it means if you have to travel 2 days to get there, you have family at home, maybe take that first day to sit there at your hotel, make sure you're organized, schedule out all your claims, make sure everyone has 1, 2, 3 contact attempts, make sure your notes are updated on that very first day, and then hit it the next day.
Right.
Yeah. That's you bring that up. I was going to ask you about organization. Do you have like a spreadsheet or a flow chart or
Yeah.
how do you keep up with all that?
It depends on what I'm running on. If I have a good claims management software, then I will use that as my management. I have a big old legal pad, and that's where I'm writing my schedules. Each page is a different day. If I struggle using Exact Analysis as my management software, I lose claims in that. So I'll go through every 3 or 4 days, or whenever, when the storms start winding down, it's kind of lower volume. I'll go through and check every single claim and be like, okay, just because I'm so scared of something slipping through the cracks.
Yeah.
But I just use pen and paper. I'll make a note of no contact ones that I don't have contact with. And that list, I'll slowly cross them off or add more to it. And yeah, just pen and paper is what I use. I don't really like using the spreadsheet for it.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I get it. Well, hey, Brady, I really appreciate it. I mean, I think we pretty much touched on everything we had today. It was a lot of good stuff, a lot of stuff for new adjusters, like I said, may not be aware of, that may help them get into it. I know coming from a seasoned person like yourself, it helps a new person see what's the end game and where can I get to, how can I manage the stress and the equipment and the tools. I think you touched on all that really well. Right. So that's all I have. David, do you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you hit it right on the head. I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to invest in, pay it forward, so to speak.
Yeah. Anytime you'll need me, just holler.
All right. Thanks, Brady.
Thanks, sir.
Have a good one, man.
See you.
All right. Thanks.